Good morning, everyone. How are you doing out there? So glad to be here. It's Patricia Hayes here, your executive advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist with our coffee time career chat, authentic networking edition. So glad to see you all back here today. Hope you all had a great holiday weekend if you are in the US. And if you are somewhere else in the world, I just hope that you had a really good, relaxing weekend. So glad to be back with the last in our series where we've been focusing on National Career Development Month, which is in November. And we've just completed that. And today we are finalizing that series by talking about when to create a networking niche. So, I love this. I have not talked about this topic before, but it came up in the context of so many times people want to try to talk about, oh, well, you need to narrow down who you're looking at, who you're talking to. And that can be true and accurate, right? But it's also within a certain context. So it's not that you want to narrow down your networking outreach altogether, because that can be detrimental. That's when, if you attended my Diversifying Your Professional Relationships workshop this summer, I talked about that in the context of wanting to make sure that you have a diverse and broad network, and diverse in so many ways, right? um, Economically, by industry, by race and ethnicity, by gender, all of those things. It's very broad, very comprehensive, because you never know when you will need to tap into someone that's not specifically within the field or the context in which you're working or seeking to work or whatever that might be. So it's not helpful to narrow your niche completely, to narrow your network completely, because what you do not want is a homogenous network, right? You do not want a homogenous professional group of people that all look and sound alike. That's not beneficial to you for the long haul. However, there may be times, and we're going to talk about them here today, when it might be helpful that when you are trying to get some new relationships going or whatever, that it might be helpful and beneficial to actually narrow your focus for particular reasons. And that is what we're going to focus on here today. Okay. All right. So here is the first thing. When would it actually be helpful or useful to narrow down your networking efforts? The first time I'm going to say is when you need to find support or expertise for a specific project or goal. Okay. So this is not just because, like, oh, I'm looking to change industries. So I need to, I'm like, that's when you still need to keep things kind of broad. But if you are working on a very specific project, either where you are or out in the community, whatever that might be, or you have a specific goal you're trying to achieve, and it really requires some specificity with the folks that you are working with, then that's when I highly recommend that you keep your networking efforts very tight, right? This is not the time that if you are, an electrical engineer and you need some input on a specific piece of work, this is not the time to go talk to, I don't know, the creative person in your organization. It could be, but I bet you anything there is a very specific piece of information or something, way that in which that person can contribute. So that said, make sure that you know who you're looking for and what you need. That is when it will be helpful to you. You still do not want to go out spraying. If you know that you have a very specific project, a very specific goal, and you need input from people who have a certain level of expertise, then you want to make sure that you're going out there looking for that particular type of person. How do you do that? By first tapping into someone who is in your professional network already, who has either that experience or good relationships to people with that experience. This is what your professional networks are for, not just to tap into the one person that you have, but so that you can then tap into their network. This is that piece where I say you don't need to know 500 or 5,000 people. You just need to know 50 pretty good, right? And be really to tap into them. And that is what is super important here in this respect, right? So, this is why it's really important to keep a good, solid networking circle around you so that at any given time you can tap into a variety of people and resources and to make sure that you don't have any gaps in that. All right. So make sure you tap into someone who's already in your network. That is the obvious, and it's the obvious that many people overlook. The second thing is to go check out some professional association or group or something like that. So if, let's say, you need a certain type of expert in, I don't know, corporate tax, then go look at an organization where there are tax accountants or tax lawyers or whatever that might be. Okay, go directly to the source and try to connect with someone there. Go ask for a referral. Those are very important resources. So tap into someone who's already in your network, tap into an association or a group that is affiliated with the type of persons that you are looking for. Okay. And then sometimes it doesn't hurt to make an ask to a core group of people that you know. Right. So this may be reaching out to people who don't have that area of expertise, but who you rely on for good information oftentimes. Right. So it may only be 4 or 5 people. This is not sending out an email blast saying, hey, I'm looking for this. Could it be, useful? Sure, but probably not. Not unless you are within a group that where there are again, there's people, it's still kind of controlled. I'm thinking about my networking group, right? My women's professional networking group, where I might send out an ask like that because it is a specific group of people, even though it may not have that expertise, but I know that I'm limiting the ask to a certain number of people, right? Not just blanket across the board. So I highly recommend that. It's so hilarious because last week I literally got a call and got on a call with one of my Canadian business friends who reached out to me for that very reason, right? So there's a potential project that she's working on, and she knew that she needed a little bit of insight because it's with a US client. And some of the things that were going, she's like, I'm not quite sure where to go. And I could be spending hours, looking for a needle in a haystack. And so she's like, so I reached out to you, Patricia, because I know that you stay pretty well informed and connected, and that hopefully you would be able to speed up this process for me as I start to lay a foundation for doing some of the research related to this work. So it was great. It was a perfect example of that type of thing where you reach out to someone who has a broad network or a broad source sense of resources, even if you're not sure that they are the exact one to provide the content or the information that you're looking for. Okay, I get those calls all the time. It always cracks me up. Okay, the number two reason when you might start looking at a networking niche is when there is a confidentiality or discretion is required for the situation. I have come across these types of things often. For those of you who don't know, I used to work in politics. I used to work for, some high level folks in state government and in politics. So there was always some situation where I needed to reach out to talk to someone to get a second opinion or to search for some more information. But I had to be extremely careful about who those people were because the situation either required extreme discretion, right? If I was dealing with very sensitive information, or because it was a confidential, there was a confidentiality aspect to it, right? This is when people will often get themselves boxed in because they were like, oh my gosh, I can't talk to anybody because. No, unless there is some very specific, like you have a non disclosure agreement or something like that, there are still ways to get input on a situation if you handle it correctly. Okay. So, absent some written agreement that says, no, you cannot talk to other people about this, right? So, we're not talking about those. I am not advocating violating any written agreements that you have regarding something. I am saying, though, that if you have a situation especially when it's extremely confidential or discretionary, you really don't want to give out that type of information, right? So you're going to tap into very, very few people. Most of the time, it's probably three or four at max. They're going to be people who are extremely trustworthy, who are basically, I like to call them a vault. When you have conversations, you know that it's not going anywhere because you've built up that relationship before. Now, if you don't have anybody in your network like this, then you need to start facilitating that type of relationship immediately. All right. We all need that kind of person where you can take sensitive information to and know that it's not going anywhere else. Right, is extremely important. Why? Because as professionals, first of all, like you can't be walking around holding in a bunch of stuff all the time and feeling because it gives you a sense of being feeling trapped, right? And that's not healthy. It's not healthy personally or professionally. So you want to make sure that you build up a relationship with someone who you can trust in that way. Um, and that's something that happens over time. It may not happen, it could happen pretty quickly. Most of the time, it takes a little bit more time. So at least identify someone that you may already be relying on, but just maybe not to that degree. So this is something that takes some reflection. Okay. Another way of doing that is when you have a situation. I've done this before when I was shifting positions and I was at a very high level and I did not want people all in my business. So I went back, I call it my networking circles, and I went back like four or five, rings out to people who most of them were older than me at the time. They had solid careers and they were either folks that I was directly connected to or they were connected to someone else I trusted. What does that look like? A former boss, um, a friend of a mentor, right? Those are the types of people. People that I like to call that were in my fan club. So they were folks who were always asking about how am I doing? Let me know if I ever needed anything, and always just took an interest, right? And so those are some of the people you could include in something like this as well, right? And so when you do that, it's also very to protect yourself and or the situation is if you are unable to give specifics, then use the analogy approach. It's always, always very helpful, right? Make it more generalized without giving details, but you can still, but inaccurate enough so that you can get some sound advice. Okay. But this is one of those times when you absolutely are not doing a spray and go, right? You are not sending out an email. You're probably not even putting it in writing. These are conversations that may end up with a text or a message that says, hey, do you have some time to talk, get on the phone, get on a Zoom, because I have an issue I'm trying to work through, and it's a highly sensitive nature, right? That kind of gives people a heads up. And again, you're only reaching out to a very, very small amount of people when that happens, 3 to 5 max. And that way you keep your confidentiality, your discretion situation very tight. There's nothing worse than someone having information and not being able to hold on to it. I was just talking to someone about this morning, and I had a little trigger moment because I had that happen one time when I was making a significant career move and had not had a time to share that information with my staff because someone ran their mouth. So, that's not cool. That's not cool. To this day, I'm not quite sure who it was. I'm very, like probably 90% sure of who it was at the time. But again, it happened so quickly and without my being able to do anything about it. So you don't ever want to put someone in that type of position. So make sure that you find a human vault that you can share things with and know that it's not going somewhere else. And the way you ensure that is you keep the circle extremely tight. All right. So that's the second situation. The third situation where you might want to create a niche when you're networking for a specific purpose is when you are trying to create a consistent sounding board for the next level moves. And I referenced this a little bit when I did it once, but this is something I did probably that there were some very specific things going on in that situation, so that's why I did it that way. But overall, like I do have a group of people, and when I use group loosely, like a tight group that I have referenced over the years when making some significant moves or when I'm thinking about moving to the next level in my career or business, right? So when I was working in a regular 9 to 5, that group looked a little bit different. It included my mentor of, 20, 30 years. It included a couple of former colleagues who were colleagues with me at very high levels, right? It included um, a couple of friends who were at the same professional level as I was, and so I knew that I could get some objective input, not just as a friend, but as from someone as a professional, right? So there's, again, probably as I'm going through this in my head, 5, 6 people. And then maybe I pull in somebody here or there, depending on the situation. Now, things have shifted some as I moved from, working working as an executive in a organizational environment to doing it as an entrepreneur and running my own business, right? So sometimes some of those people still overlap, right? Because I value their input, they know me already, and I can go to them and get some good sound advice the but it has shifted, right? Because when you are running your own business, when you are doing things in a new field, like sometimes you really need to pull in some people who understand what you're doing right now. And so that has shifted for me so that I have pulled in some folks that I will say newer, as in I haven't known them for 10 or 15 years, right? Or 30 years. So maybe I've known them for 5 or 6 years. Some of them I've only known for a year or two, right? Because we've gotten to know each other very intently and very seriously, pardon me, as a result of some coaching groups we've been a part of some networking groups we've been a part of. And I don't use those words, loosely as like, oh, okay, we're just hanging out with some folks. No, these are groups or services that I've paid for. And so there's an extra level of responsibility, of intentionality when engaging with these folks because we've all paid to be a part of this experience. And the whole point of the experience is to engage with other professionals, other entrepreneurs, other small business owners at a level so that you can utilize them for collaboration, for resources and things like that. Okay, so remember when I mentioned that sometimes those relationships can be built quickly, but you have to be kind of careful about how that happened. That's one way, right? There are some folks that I have come across in my professional women's networking group, and from a couple of my more recent coaching experiences where I was receiving coaching. So I'm not giving coaching, but where I was receiving coaching myself, but there were other professional women in that experience and in that program that I've like, oh my, like I love this person, I love their vibe. I think we can relate on some things. And we've just connected outside of the program, outside of the group. And now we are, collabing, we are utilizing each other as resources for future work on both sides. Okay. So that's how you can make that happen a little bit more quickly, but still know that you're getting some level of eh, commitment and respect for the process and some sound advice along the way. Okay. So I loved having a chit chat about that one. I had not explored that topic before. It may be worth going back into at some time in the future. So I hope that you've enjoyed that. If you want to be able to do a deeper dive on some of the things that we've talked about, I mentioned about diversifying your professional relationship. I mentioned about solidifying your networking circle and who's in it. I want to invite you to go to patriciavhayes.com and go look for the Black Friday page. There's a link to it from the front page, from the homepage, because in there I have all kinds of goodies of works that we have done over the course of this year or for this year, where you can go pick up those experiences. My Diversifying Your Professional Relationships workshop is a part of that, and that's a 5-day workshop that you can go back. You can now purchase and have access to all of that content, which includes a workbook, a couple of interviews, and all of that. The networking circle self-audit template, which was so much fun to create. I've had it for quite some while. So I encourage you to go pick that up for next to nothing. It's a great little resource, though, to keep you at the top of your game on making sure that you have the right people in your circle. And a couple of other different things. One of them is the 12 days of networking. Just a little play on the 12 days of Christmas. So much fun I had putting that together. Again, some content that I put out sometime before, but now repackaged, and a lovely little fun thing for you to utilize over the holidays and to get your networking in a very consistent way over this time period. So there's more goodies there as well. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Or if you want to schedule a one-to-one, time is running short, but there's still a little bit of time to pick up on a couple of VIP days if that's something that you need before the end of the year. All right. So thanks again for joining. I look forward to seeing you. Remember, December, we will be pulling things from the video vault so that I can work on some fresh content in some new areas, but you will have access to still some great things over the next month. So continue to tune in at this time, and you will still get to have your coffee chats. Take care, everyone, and have a great day. Bye-bye.